Hey everyone, so I've been getting a lot of questions about what skill combos are best to use in any given situation, or depending on how much damage you do, what would be best for you to cycle between. And now that I've had a bit more time since the revamp happened to do the math and sort of test things out, I'm able to give a bit more of an in-depth analysis than I gave in my previous guide video. So that's what this video is going to be. I'm going to cover which skills have the best percent damage per second and which skills have the best hits per second. So you'll get sort of both ends of the spectrum there, what you should be using when you're capping and what you should be using when you're not capping. That's basically how I'm going to break it down. So without further ado, go ahead and get started here, and I'll pull up the values. There we go. Okay, so before we get into all the mer skills down here, I'm just going to quickly run through mana circle, or mana burst rather. So attack speed does affect mana burst, as I said in the last video, and I've gotten more of a concrete values as far as the effect of attack speed goes. So if you just use booster and return dive, so use booster here and then return dive, get that extra +1 attack speed. With just these, you're going to be at 12.267 hits per second with mana burst. If you go one step further and use decent speed infusion or a green MP potion, doesn't matter which order you use these in, you'll reach 13.467 hits per second. So I'll go ahead and use speed infusion, and that is what that looks like. And then finally, if you go to +5 attack speed, you'll reach 14 hits per second. So like this. And you can go higher if you get the inner ability for +1 attack speed. I think that will still benefit you, but I don't have it, so no, I can't really give you the value there. But for now, this is what I've tested and come up with, so hopefully that's enough to help out with any questions regarding mana burst. And then moving on into the mer skills and the fusion skills. Here in the middle, I sort of have all the math I did with each skill. So first up are the dives, and then the flashes, and then all of the breath skills. So starting with Thunder Dive, it's 42 hits in 4 seconds. You know the duration of the skill by just the description, duration 4 seconds. And then in the previous video I showed the testing of the hits per second, or rather the hits per usage, which is how I got 42. Attack speed does not affect any of these skills like I covered in the last video, so you don't need to worry about having all these buffs for these. It only matters for mana burst. But yeah, Thunder Dive, 42 hits in 4 seconds, and it does 395% damage. One thing to note when you're looking at the percent damage of the skills, usually the initial damage here, like you can see it says 135%. That won't actually be the real value, because if you go to the next mer skill, you can see here we have Thunder Dive damage plus 260 percentage points. So you add the original 135 plus the passive 260 from Dragon Breath, and that's how you get the 395 that I have here. So multiplying 395 by 42, we get 16,590% damage every time you use Thunder Dive, if all the orbs hit a single target. And then to get the percent damage per second, we just divide that by the duration, which is 4 as listed in the skill description there, which gives us 4,147.5% damage per second. And then basically just following the same steps with every skill. You want to make sure, I just realized this is probably covering it, but you want to make sure when you're going over, like here you can see Thunder Dive is listed as 135%, but then if you go up to Dragon Breath it says plus 260% for Thunder Dive. You want to make sure you're adding all of those passives. So Dragon Dive gives a few to some of the flash skills. I don't think Dragon Flash has any now. So you just want to add all of the passive damage from both Dragon Dive and Dragon Breath when you're doing the math there. I'll bring this back up. So yeah, basically following that same process for all the skills. For Earth Dive and Thunderflash, I had to time the duration on my own because it's not it's not listed in game. I'll close this back down here. As you can see, it just says damage per crash, number of attacks, blah blah blah, and then earth dive, 3 crashes. You don't really get a duration listed on these, so I did a couple time trials with my my phone timer. So these may not be 100% accurate, but they're about as accurate as I could get them. So basically, just so we're like 100% clear, my methodology for how to time these was I'll use Earth Dive as an example. So I'm gonna activate it, and then when Myrrh comes back to my character is when I stopped the timer. So I started the timer as soon as I activated the skill, and then I stopped it as soon as I saw Myrrh reappear here. So that's the activation, and then right there is where I would stop it. So that's how I got the time duration values for both Thunderflash and Earth Dive. So again, just multiply the hits per use by the percent damage, which you have to add up for most of these, to get the total percent damage per use, and then to get the percent damage per second, you just divide the total percent by the duration. So that's how all of this math came about, and then rather than sitting here and going through, you can look at those for yourself if you want, pause the video or something if you want the exact values, but then I'm just going to go ahead and move on to the rankings down here. So first up we have best percent damage value. These are the skills that have the most percent damage per second when you use them. So if you don't cap, these are probably what you're going to want to use in this order. There is a little bit of a caveat with Thunderflash, because the hitbox is like kind of whack. Thunderflash is a bit weird because it's definitely the strongest skill as far as percent damage per second goes, but that only applies if you hit every single point on Thunderflash. So I'll use Thunderflash here, and you can see, you know, it has the 5 points. The hitbox around these is pretty small, and so if the mob you're fighting or the boss you're fighting isn't like really large, odds are you will not hit all 5 of those points. So in most cases, Thunderflash actually is not number 1 on this list, which is why I put 1A on the list. But for some bosses, it will be, like Golux, I guess, is pretty big, so it's probably hard to miss the points on that. Similarly, Lotus Stage 1, that might be it as far as things that are easy to hit the points on go. Potentially Vellum, but it's kind of hard to aim this in Vellum, so, you know, use at your own risk, I guess. But getting back to the list here. So 1A, we have Thunderflash if all of the points hit, which, you know, pretty big if. It's really difficult to actually land all of those hits. What I consider to be the actual number 1 is Thunder Dive, and then followed by Thunder Dive we have Wind Flash, and then Earth Dive, and we have Breath. This is just Breath alone. It is not Earth Breath or Wind Breath, it's just Breath. So just this. You don't use Wind Breath, this is not good. You don't use Earth Breath, that is similarly not as good. As you can see in the list, obviously, Earth Breath is number 5, Wind Breath is number 6. You can see the values up here. Breath alone was at 3,200% damage per second, while Wind Breath was the worst at 2,688% per second, and Earth Breath was 2,800% per second. So that is the layout for best percent damage values per second. I would say probably a safe bet would be to just stick to Thunder Dive and Wind Flash unless you're confident that you can hit every single point of Thunder Flash. I haven't really found a situation besides Golux where I've been able to consistently do so. So I would definitely recommend just using these, and then maybe Earth Dive if you feel so inclined. But then moving on to the best hits per second value. This is what you want to focus on if you already hit max damage. So up here is what you want if you're not capping on stuff. Here is where you want to look if you're already capping. You don't really care so much about the percent damage. So best hits per second by far was Wind Flash with 18.28 hits per second. Followed by that was just Breath, Again, just the base breath, so just that, no wind or earth or anything. Coming in third, we have Thunder Dive at 10.5 hits per second. Earth Breath and Thunderflash were tied at 10, but I put Thunderflash lower on the list because, again, it's only 10 if you hit every single point, which is pretty hard. So there's that. Wind Breath coming in at 9.14, and then Earth Dive is the worst at 6. So best practice if you're already capping with Wind Flash and Breath, just use those two. Thunder Dive is, I would say it's something that's pretty equivalent to Breath, more or less. The difference isn't as big as it would be like if you were just using these two instead of Wind Flash. Thunder Dive is definitely what you want to use for Dojo. That's another thing I should mention, is that in Dojo, obviously, odds are you aren't capping. If you are, good for you, but odds are you aren't, and so Thunder Dive is definitely something you want to use constantly in Dojo. It's really good. And then I've been using Wind Flash in Dojo as well. Even though it's low damage, the math sort of proves that it's better than everything else as far as percent damage per second. So I'm running with the assumption that it is in fact better, and I've been using it as frequently as possible. Some mobs in Dojo, like Lily and Magnus, fly up in the air, and then the orbs go under them. So Wind Flash is really good for hitting them while they're in the air, and the other skill I've been using for hitting aerial mobs is Earth Breath, because it's very tall, as you can see here. Like it starts here, so if Magnus is up over there, you just bam, right into him. So it's really hard to miss. So that's sort of how I've been running bosses, and you can see that from the bossing videos I put out recently, is that I mostly tried to use Wind Flash and Breath. In some bosses I ended up not rotating at all, and I just used Wind Flash. That was mostly because I was worried about dodging, and I figured if I was trying to constantly optimize these two, I would sort of sacrifice a bit of my ability to dodge, especially in Chaos Bonbon. I was kind of struggling to constantly use both skills, so I just stuck with Wind Flash and dealt with the minor cooldown. Because of my cooldown reduction hat, it's actually not that bad. So I'll just show it here. Oh, okay, cool. So as you can see, it's only on cooldown for like 1 second. The skill just ended, and now it's back up. So that's what I was using for Chaos Bonbon. I would recommend that whenever you're worried about, survivability, you don't focus so much on constantly swapping skills. It's better to stay alive and to use like only one continuously than it is to continuously switch and get that extra DPS in. So hopefully that answers some people's questions. I know a lot of people are struggling trying to figure out what skills to use depending on their situation or what boss they're fighting, so hopefully this breaks it down a little more clearly for people and allows them to make better decisions when it comes to what their combos are going to be for certain boss fights. I'll probably be putting out a training video pretty soon, because spoiler alert if you hadn't already figured it out for yourself, Evan training really good. So I'll cover a bit of that maybe tomorrow, maybe over the weekend, I'm not sure, but definitely look out for that. And then that's pretty much it. That's all I had to cover in this video, so thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.